Okay, we have our bottom bracket disassembled such that we can inspect the cones, and although the cone on the left-hand side is marginally okay, it should be replaced, and the cone on the right-hand side is completely shot. It's going to be difficult for you to see, but there's metal mashed up around the edge of it, there's pitting, it's just destroyed. That should be a precision machined surface for the ball bearings to roll on, and that one is far from it. That's like a gravel road now. So this is going to be a juncture where we have to put this project on hold, do some research, try to track down the right components to rebuild the bottom bracket, by which I mean new cups and cones. I'll replace both of them because it doesn't make any sense to replace just one without the other. And new ball bearings, but I'll retain all the rest of the hardware, the dust covers, the bearing retainers, and as soon as I track all that stuff down, then this project can move forward as far as reassembly goes. In the meantime, I'll continue tearing down the frame, and once I've got everything off of it, then I'll continue to clean it. I don't know if you can see, but I've already started to clean the front part of the frame here. This I've hit with a little bit of rubbing compound and wax, and I stopped about right here. I've done the neck and this. I just wanted to see what that paint was going to look like when I got done. This is pretty rusty right here. That's just got some rubbing compound, that white stuff on there. That'll clean off, but then it'll just be rusty. But down here, all this grease and dirt and grime, the back half of the frame hasn't been touched yet, and I'll clean the seat post a bit. So I'll do that while I'm waiting on the parts for the bottom bracket. Okay, now I am still working on the bottom bracket, and what I'm going to do and show you how to do is to remove the cups from the bottom bracket. This here is what I'm calling the bottom bracket, this tube right here. And these are the cups, which is a race where the ball bearing runs. And these are just pushed in here on either side. And what I'll be doing is removing the old ones, and I'll be doing it with a drift. A drift is just a name for a tool that's a chunk of metal that you place against something, and then you tap a hammer against the back of that, and it'll slowly transfer that energy to whatever it is you're tapping on. These cups have a little lip, and they're just pushed in there, so I'll be using this drift to contact them from the back side and push them out. That one on this side of the bike, and then I'll come from the other side of the bike to get this one out. I don't have to be particularly delicate with these because I'm not going to reuse them. They're shot, they're old, and I'm going to discard them once I get them out of the bike. And I'll try to set the camera up here. There we go. Well, so that you can have a view of this process, but it's really straightforward. You can do this yourself, no problem. On there more tighter than I thought it would, but it's been in there since the late 1940s, so I'm not surprised that it's getting circulation. So there's the cup out of one side of the bottom bracket. I've ordered a new set, so I'll be discarding that and putting in the new one when it arrives. In the meantime, I will hang on to these so that I can double check the dimensions of the new ones when they arrive, and then send these to the recycler. Alright, there you have it. I removed the cups from the bottom bracket. They're all greasy and nasty, but I'm not even going to bother to clean them because I'm not going to reuse them. Alright, there you have it. Okay, it's time to clean up the bottom bracket area of the bike because our new bottom bracket components have arrived. This is a nice clean version of what a bottom bracket is. I had to order these online. I went to every single local bike store within driving distance of my house. There's 5 of them, and they didn't have this in stock. So I simply ordered it for myself. It's a Wald part. Wald is a bicycle part manufacturer. And this is what a bottom bracket set looks like for a one-piece crank American bicycle. These are the cups. They don't have threads on them or anything like that, and that's where the ball bearings roll around in there. And these simply push into each side of this little tube here on the bottom of your frame. The ball bearings roll around in those, like this. And that is the cup, that's the ball bearings. And this is the cone part. The cone part has threads on the inside that thread onto the crank. And the cone part also rests on the ball bearings. So those threads contact your crank and support it, and it rolls on the ball bearings, and the other side is very similar to this. And then there's some nuts and washers to hold the whole thing together, stop it from falling apart. So first I'm going to clean this here, and then I'm going to reassemble the bottom bracket there. Shouldn't have stuck that in before I cleaned it. All right, I'm just doing an initial cleanup here, and you can kind of see that this grease and dirt that's packed on here has been on there so long that it actually protected some of the paint. You can see here was dirt and grease was all packed on here, so this paint didn't get sun faded. This paint over here didn't have too much dirt and grease on it, so it got a little faded right there. So this thing has been pretty dirty for a good long while now, but I'm gonna remove all this dirt and junk, and then I'm gonna go over the frame with some cutting paste and wax and get it as nice as I can. Okay, I've been working over the bottom bracket with a scrub brush. Used to be a brush for dishes. And I put a little pan under there to catch any areas. And I'm simply using some dishwashing detergent in water in an old spray bottle. It used to have a window cleaner in it, but now it's just dish soap water. I've sprayed that on there and cleaned this up quite nicely, and even got inside there a little bit. When you're cleaning up and you get water like that inside of any part of your frame, which I am right here, because this is soap water, you want to make sure that is good and dry before you seal it up, because you don't want it to rust out. And if it's not nice and dry when you seal it up, that moisture will stay in there and rust out your frame. So I'm going to not only just towel this off, but let it sit for quite a while so that I'm confident that all the moisture has evaporated before I put this thing back together. If you're really going to do this to a very high level of perfection, then you would want to completely disassemble this down to a bare frame and sit there and polish every little last part of the frame. I'm going to hit it as well as I can without disassembling it. I already did the forks. Well, I'll have to take off the rear wheel. Maybe I will disassemble it, but for right now I'm going to hit the middle section of the bike while it's still on the kickstand and I've still got the wheels on it. If it just sits there, it should be fairly easy to work on. Getting the rear triangle, or whatever you call that, I'll probably have to take the rear wheel off and set it on its side to get inside these tubes right here. I won't have much access with that wheel on there. I've already done the front forks, so that's about as good as they're going to get. I did the front part of the bike already. So I'll just be working on the midsection of the bike here, and what I'm going to be using is a combination of rubbing compound. You can get rubbing compound at your auto parts supply store. That's where I got this. This is made by a well-known wax manufacturer, but rubbing compound basically will allow you to remove a layer of oxidation. But be careful with it, because if you get too aggressive with it, you can cut right through your paint, because there's not much paint left on this bike, and it might be oxidized all the way through. So rub it a little bit. If it doesn't get too much more shiny, then let off. I also have another type of compound that's a little bit more mild. This one's a heavy-duty rubbing compound. This one's a much more mild rubbing compound that's safe for clear coat. Rubbing compounds that say safe for clear coat on them are very mild. And then I'm going to finish it up with a wax to preserve and protect what's left there. So that's what I'm going to get on to next. Here I've just applied some rubbing compound right in this area right here, and I'm just going to wipe it off. You can see the rubbing compound has a red color to it. I don't know if they all have a red color to it, but I think that the red color indicates that it's got a specific kind of grit in it. Rubbing compound has a very gentle abrasive in it, and I think that red is something similar to what they call jeweler's rouge, which is something that jewelers use for polishing, you know, precious metals and maybe gemstones too. I don't know what they use it for, but they use it for somehow. I think you can see that that's helped cut some of the oxidation off of there. There's a little tiny bit of shine you can see glinting on some of what's left of the paint. This down here is too gone. There's almost no paint left there, but there's some along the top here and there. So now I'm gonna hit it with the other compound that I have, the mild one. Now I'm just finishing up with the more mild compound, which I'm hitting this little section of the frame with. You can see the shines come up quite a bit more. This area is still too dull to get any real shine off of it. That paint is just too far gone there, but it's as good as it's ever gonna look again. This particular mild compound, I wish you could smell this. It smells really good. I mean, it's like some kind of like, almost like cinnamon or cardamom or some kind of spice, but like really subtle. It's actually really, I don't know why. Maybe that's a weird thing to say, but this particular compound smells good. All right, now I'm just gonna hit this area with the wax, and after I've done that, then you'll be able to see that that's the treatment that I'm gonna do to the whole frame. And you can see that this is as shiny as it's gonna get, nice and clean, but it's still rough. Here I've just started to apply the coat of wax. This is a cleaner and a cleaner wax. I think the idea is that it cleans the finish as well as applies a layer of wax to it. And the one thing I want to caution you about with all of these products that you're rubbing on your vintage bike that has its old patinaed paint job, ooh, almost knocked the bike over, is stay away from silicone. A lot of these products have silicone in them. You don't want to put anything on an old paint job that has silicone in it, because you'll never get the silicone back off of there, and you'll never get any new paint to stick to that surface. The silicone will just basically ruin, it'll take away the option of ever repainting the bike without stripping it with a sandblaster and really just going to great lengths to get all the silicone off of it. So stay away from silicone if you're doing an old bike with patina on it like this. All right, I think I have that kickstand a little bit better. I had to shut off the camera and put the bike back on its kickstand properly because I pushed it off its kickstand. All right, so I'm gonna let that dry for just a second, not too long. It's kind of cold and rainy here today, so there's a lot of moisture in the air and it's not ideal conditions for drying. You can see that that's not just the rubbing compound that's coming off there. Some of that is red paint. That's just oxidized old paint that's turned into dust that's just barely clinging to the top surface of that paint job. All right, so this gives you an idea of what the rest of the bike's gonna look like. I don't know if you can see, but it's really, it looks a lot better than it did when I first started. It's never gonna be perfect, but this is neat. That'll be acceptable. Also, you can use your judgment with these different, like compounds and the wax. Some spots on the bike won't necessarily need compound. Up here on these upper tubes, I hit those before with compound, so I'm not gonna do it again, but I've never used compound here. But there's the remnants of an old decal there, and I don't wanna burn through that, which I quite nearly could very easily, so I'm just gonna use wax on that. And that's just a judgment call. This is a wax and a cleaner, and the physical application of the wax is bringing up some of the oxidation off that top layer of paint at any rate. So I think that will be good enough for this. I'm almost done with the whole middle section of the bike here. So next I'll have to take off the rear wheel and lay it on its side to get at the rear dropouts and the rear triangle. Okay, I'm cleaning up the chain wheel and the crank. And right now I'm putting a lot of hot water on this cone here. This cone is completely shot, and I'm going to actually use some vice grips to grab a hold of it and get it off, because I don't have the proper tool to remove it. The vice grips will ruin that part, so if you're going to save it, do not use vice grips. Get the proper tool to take it off of there. But since this is shot and I have a replacement that's already arrived that I know will work, I'm going to remove it with vice grips and just throw it away. I've been cleaning the chain wheel a little bit with simply soapy water and a brass wire brush. You want to use a brass wire brush on chrome and not a stainless steel brush, because brass is softer than chrome. It won't scratch your chrome. And here we go. I've got the channel, or the vice grips on the cone that I'm going to remove, and I heated that cone up with hot water. You could also use a propane torch, and that's unstuck it. So now I'll be able to remove the cone that's on the right hand side of the crank. As you can see, it's threaded with a normal right hand thread. The left hand side is threaded left hand thread, but the right hand side is bigger than the left hand side, so it can just slip right over those threads and come all the way off of your crank. After you have that right hand side cone off, then the grease or the dust seal will just come right off. It doesn't have any threads, and you can take the chain wheel off. The chain wheel is just simply held on by that cone as if it were a nut, and it's got one little hole in there that engages this arm on the crank, and that's what holds your chain wheel in place while you're rolling along, so it doesn't just slip and slip. So now that I've got these pieces apart, I'll finish cleaning up the chain wheel and the crank. Okay, we're back. I've cleaned the crank arm and the chain wheel using only a brass wire brush and soapy water. And now I'm going to put wax on them to prevent them from rusting further. These pieces also look very much at home on this bike. There's still plenty of chrome left on this crank, but there's scars where there's rust bleeding through, and I've gotten most of the surface rust off, but there's places where it's cut right through the chrome, and for instance on the outer side or the inner side of the left-hand side of the crank, you can see that this bottom portion is quite rusty. But they're going to look right at home on the bike. They're original to the bike, as far as I can tell. And also these chain wheels, they kind of tell you about the bike a little bit. This bike, although the name brand is Rollfast, Rollfast was made by a company called D.P. Harris. And this is a very, not a typical necessarily chain wheel for D.P. Harris, but it's specific to D.P. Harris. As you can see, the design incorporates these H's, which that stands for Harris. And D.P. Harris made Rollfast bicycles and Rollfast roller skates. I actually had a pair of Rollfast roller skates when I was a kid. They were metal skates with clay wheels that you strapped onto your sneakers. I don't recommend them. They weren't that good to roll around on the sidewalk on, but I had a blast with them when I was a kid. All right, so I'm going to put wax on these, and then I'm going to show you how to reassemble the bottom bracket. Okay, I'm just finishing applying the wax to the crank arm. I've already applied wax to the chain wheel. There's nothing you can do about the crank arm. If one side's rusted than the other, both sides show equally. However, the chain wheel is a different story. And this chain wheel has one side that's really rusty and one side that's really not. So I will flip it around so that the really rusty side faces in toward the frame of the bicycle, and the nice shiny side faces out to where more people will see it. That'll improve the look of the bike a little bit.